Hello YouTube. I'd like to start this video with a quick question. Do you ever wish you had more vault space? Destiny is a collection game. It's normal for players to want to keep all of their unique armor and weapons, and when you throw in ships, shaders, sparrows, mods, exotics, and a whole slew of other stuff, your vault can get so full it leaves no room for the next awesome thing you find. There is actually a way to store new items after capping out at 500 though. Early in Destiny 2, I found a workaround for the vault space cap. The first step is to find an item in your vault and hover over it. It can be a shader that you could grab from collections, or a weapon you haven't used yet, or anything else really. Look closely at the bottom of the item's dialog box. There should be a button next to the word dismantle. All you have to do is press and hold down that button, and the item clogging up your vault space should literally disappear out of your vault. Using this method, I've managed to narrow down my storage space to only a few exceptional weapons that I actually use, and thanks to that I have plenty of space for my Platinum Starling collection. My favorite one is the deep blue one because it reminds me of a parrot if parrots were blue, but sometimes I like to use the red one too because it makes my load times faster, and if I'm feeling particularly bold, I'll sometimes use the red and blue one, but that's obviously a little extreme for day-to-day space travel. Really though, it's just a gray ship. But anyway, when I most recently took inventory of what items were bogging down my storage space, I found that nothing left was hot trash I was never going to use in the first place. I didn't even know what to poof away at that point. Take for instance this bug out bag. Recluse has been the best SMG for such a long time that it just didn't make any sense to use a different SMG. Heck, most of the time it didn't make sense to use a different gun, period. But this bug out bag was kinda my backup plan in the event that Bungie noticed they had accidentally put an extra 0 in the buff percentage for Master of Arms, which it looks like they finally might have. So is it time to pull out my bug out bag and finally show everyone the new SMG meta? Probably not, because quite honestly SMGs are just terrible. Ricochet rounds pushes their range from the I can literally smell you zone to the I can't quite literally smell you now, but I for sure still smell something zone. So once Ricochet rounds are gone, I'm expecting that we'll get to see the real-time collapse of that entire category of weapon. I'm thinking it'll go down like the PvE sidearm meta, which, as we all know, is a thing that never happened and never will happen. But for now, this very fast reloading bug out bag is kinda cool. Since Swashbuckler activates on kills, it's nice to practically skip the reload animation to ensure continued uptime. It effectively has Swashbuckler times 5 continuously against weak enemies, so it's actually not that far behind Recluse. Still, it's an SMG, so I should probably delete it just to be on the safe side. But what about this handy dandy Soul Survivor? It's actually a competitive meta weapon, and yet it doesn't get used at all right now. Why? Well, as you know if you've already watched my Spare Rations video, that's because Reckoning feeds upon your mortal soul, much like Satan, the king of hell, so most people avoid it. On top of that, our good friend the Mountaintop has unilaterally defined the PvE meta since it was introduced, so nobody bothers using anything else. Regardless, I had already traded my soul for a wealth of Platinum Starlings, so I had nothing to lose farming it out. After an eternity of pure dread and sorrow, I managed to get one with Firing Line, 4th times the charm, and a Pendant Mag. Now, in the current meta, you'd be surprised to hear that Soul Survivor actually does a good job keeping up with Mountaintop. It effectively has a significantly larger ammo reserve, as long as you land headshots, so in the long run, it most certainly wins in total damage. On top of that, it's actually powerful for DPS with Firing Line active. In some very limited testing against Kali, Soul Survivor was just behind Mountaintop in damage. But that's mostly because Kali's a squirrely little rascal that isn't the easiest to headshot. If she would freaking stand still, then we'd have footage of Soul Survivor doing more damage, but no, she's like a little kid getting a haircut. Stop squirming, you're ruining my science. At any rate. In quite a few tests, we had to throw the footage since Mountaintop ran out of ammo. Oh, and since Soul Survivor had to reload far less frequently, it may well be the best in slot option after Shadowkeep releases, and Lunafaction and Rally Barricades are moved to a healthier place. If that happens, you'll want a Soul Survivor with a magazine perk, triple tap, or 4th times the charm, and you'll absolutely need Firing Line because that's what pumps its DPS to the top of the chart. Naturally, it's still pretty decent even if you don't have Firing Line procced, but at that point you're better off with Field Prep instead of Firing Line, like this Beloved roll right here. So I actually should have used that for the video footage instead of Soul Survivor, but as you're probably aware the video has already been uploaded, so too late for that. I guess I'm going to ask you as viewers to use your imagination and know that if you are playing alone, you'll benefit more from Field Prep than Firing Line. Just, yeah, like this clip, same clip. I'm using Beloved instead though. Oh, and I hit this shot and the boss dies and it's awesome. Was this really my best footage? Yikes, dude. Oh, and if you luck out along the way, you can get a roll with Snapshot and Opening Shot, which is a tasty little number in PvP. And while we're talking about PvP, there are actually a lot of viable rolls for Beloved in PvP too. If you didn't already know that, it's probably too late to make use of the super high menagerie drop rates, but a roll with Quick Draw and Snapshot makes the handling just As you can see, it's capable of one-shotting players in the Crucible if you click on their head. The main drawback here is that if you miss, the gun doesn't do any damage at all, so maybe try using Jotun if that turns out to be a problem for you. Actually, let's backtrack to Soul Survivor probably beating Mountaintop once instant reloads are gone. Another, it's not really good right now, but theoretically it should be good later gun is Doomsday, which might actually have a day in the sun sometime soon. Currently, Swarm of the Raven is the best grenade launcher for DPS against bosses because it channels the dark magic of the Crucible, and it's also a void weapon. When Shadowkeep releases, Tractor Cannon will no longer specifically benefit void weapons, and Tractor Cannon itself might not be the best, so now that we can actually consider other elements, maybe Doomsday can come out of the shadows. Thing is, it needs to be used at a far distance, and it needs to land a direct hit for it to start doing its job, so to achieve that, you'll want a big, stationary target. Most enemies in Destiny are small and agile, but thanks to a handful of outliers, Doomsday might actually be a strong niche pick in some exceptional situations. For example, every raid boss in the history of the franchise. Naturally, even those larger, slower enemies can be a challenge to hit with a grenade launcher from a distance, so if you find yourself struggling with that, Jotun is still an option. I'm just saying. That probably doesn't sound very believable, but if you compare the damage of Doomsday and Swarm of the Raven with the on-screen numbers showing up right now, you'll see that Doomsday is better by about 15% per grenade, and its ammo inventory is actually slightly better too. If you don't have full cord on Doomsday, it's not worth using, and if you don't have grenade launcher reserves on both armor pieces, field prep will make whichever gun has it better, but all things equal, a God Roll Doomsday should be the stronger gun. Considering all this stuff, Doomsday and Soul Survivor have the potential to be best in slot under the right circumstances. Of course, if your teammates would rather fight at close range, both of those weapons are going to wind up looking pretty mediocre, but still, they have potential now, which is actually really cool. I love the design on Firing Line and Full Court as perks, and I really hope that we get to see those perks and more like them on new weapons in Shadowkeep. And you know what else has potential? Hush. It looks like we're going to be underleveled for a good few activities, and that's the progression space that bows can actually shine in. I could be wrong to say so, but I really want Hush to have a space where it's actually good, and when you're just at the point that hand cannons can't headshot and bows can, Hush would actually shine there. I doubt it'll be a strong option in the raid since Bow's aim forgiveness difficulty is set to IRS against the Vex, but I could see it being a worthwhile pick in nightmare hunts or other activities. Hush is pretty bad if you're using a controller though, and as much as it might be able to make a clip or two in the Crucible, I did have to spend 46 hours in quick play to get this mediocre triple kill. But anyway, the point is I keep it because it's cool even if it's not practical, because being practical is only fun for the first couple 100 hours of every expansion, and after that you have to make your own fun. My guess is that Night Watch will be a much more appropriate pick for long-range fights. Multi-kill clip turns it from a scout rifle into a low-impact sniper rifle that's easy to aim, and it's really fun to play with. I think the only reason we don't see many scout rifles or sniper rifles is that in in-game activities, there just aren't many far-away enemies. Almost any of the areas of the game that include them use them sparingly, presumably because most weapons can't do anything about enemies that are that far away, and some players wouldn't like that since it's clearly outside of Jotun's intended range. Those players clearly deserve to be punished if they're unwilling to adapt their loadout to the activity. Just because players want to position like total dummies doesn't mean AI combatants should have to also. This would be like going into Gambit with a shotgun, an SMG, and a grenade launcher, and then being upset that you keep getting sniped and truthed by invaders. Except you'd be right to complain in that case, so it's actually a bad comparison, but you see my point. We should have far away unreachable enemies, so some player on our team needs to run a long-range weapon, at least sometimes. This is actually one thing I think that Reckoning did totally right, but since it's buried under things that aren't fun to deal with, I doubt anyone will look at it that way. Anyway, I hope we have some encounters with an emphasis on far range fights in Shadowkeep, because it would be great to actually have a reason to pull out Night Watch or another scout sometimes. Just like Hush, even if I didn't really expect for the weapon to be worthwhile at any point in the future, I'd probably keep it anyway, just because it's a pleasure to use, and worst case scenario, it'll still be worth 3 legendary shards later. And you know another weapon type that we haven't seen lately? High rate of fire pulses. I don't really keep any pulse rifles, but this Outlast managed to stand out. Rangefinder does a good job of making the bullets feel like they're actually connecting, and while I don't have a whole lot of good footage of it, the weapon did feel reliable when I was using it in Crucible. I will say I tried to use versions of this gun that didn't have rangefinder, things that had Outlaw Rampage or Outlaw Kill Clip, and it just didn't feel like the bullets were reliably connecting at all, even with good range perks otherwise. The best way to describe how they felt to use without rangefinder is, have you ever been on a roller coaster, one of the ones where they don't have a floorboard so your legs can move freely, and it does one of those extended loop-de-loops where you're left upside down for just a long time before it goes back into freefall? Basically nothing like that at all. For this last oddity of my vault, we're going to have to go on a short tangent first. Did you guys see the various PvE lords recently talking about sealed Ahamkara grasps? The gist of it is that some players think those exotic hunter gauntlets are going to continue to plague boss fights by allowing auto-reload to continue to exist in Destiny's sandbox, since it gives you another way to vomit out damage with a grenade launcher after lunafactions go the way of the dodo. I think that's a dramatic reaction to the sealed Ahamkara grasps, but it's possible that players will find another way to exploit high damage like we did for Riven again, so it's not crazy to be concerned about it. Anyway, did anyone ever consider just trying to use gear that's intended to synergize with the grasps instead of trying to keep the old meta on life support with this budget auto-reloading? On the real, I really hope we can pull the plug on grenade launches for at least a little while. So what was it supposed to be used for? I think the grasps were meant to be paired with the Aikilo shotgun from Escalation Protocol for Trench Barrel, but they were totally unneeded for it. Now, with lunafactions getting their well-deserved nerf, get it? Well, the grasps and their intended purpose might finally work together as intended. I spent quite some time farming out an Imperial Decree from Menagerie that has full auto and assault mag for the doubled up fire rate buff that makes even high impact shotguns feel usable, and obviously the final perk is Trench Barrel. This gun may not be the absolute best, but if close range damage becomes a good option, you can bet I'll at least be giving it a shot. Quite frankly, I don't think giving up my Hunter's exotic slot in PvE for reloads is a good looking idea, but this is an interesting combination that I'd like to try out before writing it off. I have no doubt that it's at minimum usable, but against certain enemies it might actually be very strong. As you can see in this gameplay that definitely isn't largely a showcase of how Anarchy is the best weapon in the game, it can melt bosses. As for the other weapons I've kept, most of them are obvious meta choices. I would be glad to answer questions about anything gear related if you can catch me playing live on Twitch, which I will be doing practically non-stop for quite a few days after Shadowkeep is released on October 1st. If you're new to the series, my community there is super helpful and welcoming, but for this video I am mostly assuming those meta weapons speak for themselves. One last thing that I think a lot of people are sleeping on: why does nobody talk about Nation of Beasts curated role anymore? It amazes me that nobody talks about it or uses it in PvE now that Recluse is a thing, but once Master of Arms and Ricochet rounds are nerfed, and Dragonfly is not nerfed, I think Nation of Beasts will go from a forgotten competitor to being a decisively better weapon than Recluse. Last Wish will be back on the menu for the players who don't have it yet. Seriously, this gun is amazing, and even if it's rated very well, it's still underrated for PvE. It competes with Recluse, even if people don't act like it does. There are a lot of other great weapons in the game. I definitely haven't covered them all. Most of the ones that I talk about come from Reckoning or Menagerie. But the important thing to me is that I'm just keeping my weapons that I fully expect to get use out of, because what's the point of junking up my vault with stuff that I'll probably never use? Seriously, why are so many of you people hoarders? Do you really think you're going to miss that 6th helmet with enhanced linear fusion targeting? Shard it. Do you actually use auto rifles? Shard it. Is it a god roll? Okay, well, are you still logged into your X's account? Shard it. It's really not that hard to decide if I'm actually going to use things, and I definitely have comfort weapons, but if I decide that I actually need some weapon that I don't have, I'll go get it. The only time it's actually worth keeping things that randomly drop if I don't think much about them are god rolls that are just irreplaceable if I later decided that I should have kept them. If you just got a absolutely perfect roll on a random drop for a weapon that you don't normally use, that's worth keeping, but that's pretty much the extent of it. Anyway though, everyone's god rolls are different. It's always fun to hear what people have gotten, for them to tell me, and then I can tell them what I think of it, because we all want such different things from our guns. It's part of what makes Destiny fun. I'm super looking forward to Shadowkeep. I am so excited to play that and run a new raid with my clan again. It is going to be awesome. Those of you who haven't given Destiny a shot absolutely should when New Light comes out as well, since a lot of the content's going to be free. Really cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff for returning players as well, some throwbacks to old bosses, which looks like there's going to be a lot of bosses, and for me personally, that's exactly what I would like to see in Destiny, so I don't know. I'm looking forward to Shadowkeep. I think there's a lot of promising stuff coming. If you haven't seen the trailers for it, maybe check those out too. If you liked this video, subscribe to my channel. If you didn't like this video, click the thumbs up icon next to the subscribe button to let me know that you didn't like it. Also, be sure to follow my Twitch where I stream just about every day. I would love to see you there. Thanks so much for your time, everyone. Hope you have an awesome day, and I hope to run into you in Shadowkeep. Stay tuned for more stuff.